Here we go, hour one. Okay, I understand that the streaming music is not going to happen tonight, so we are on our own as far as that. Greetings, Earth Explorers. Welcome to X Squared Radio. I'm your host, Brooks Agnew, coming to you live from an undisclosed location east of the Appalachian Mountains. This is where the past meets the future. In here, the results are always positive. We might go a little past your imagination. Have no fear. You'll be safely traveling with us. I want to welcome everybody here tonight. The chat room is going to be live and lively. No problem there. We are trying to stream to you live on the Truth Frequency Radio Network. I hope we're going out because that goes out to TalkStream Live, which goes out to AM and FM stations all over the world. But we're also streaming to you live on several video platforms, on Foxhole, on Twitch, on Facebook, DLive, Twitter, YouTube, Rumble, and Rockfin. And you can catch our archives on Odyssey. So it is good to have you here. We may not have live breaks with Truth Frequency. We'll see what happens. The studio has been undergoing some conflicts with respect to, shall we say, server space, like most of us have. One of my websites, which is my electric truck website, EV Fleet, has also been attacked, and they went in and corrupted some of the WordPress files, so that website is down. But all my other websites are up, so don't worry. X Squared Radio is up, and brooksagnew.blog is up, which is where you can get Ivan and Roxy for yourself. All right, going to start the program a little differently tonight. We don't normally do this till later in the program, but I want to get started on this because I think it's important, given the stress that people are undergoing right now. Not just the stress from your own job and the fact that you've been under this tremendous threat from bioweapons and from nuclear weapons and from financial weapons and shadow banning and people telling you what you can and cannot think and what you can and cannot write, what you can and cannot say at work, at home, at the grocery store. It's a lot of stress. It's a lot of stress on people. And what it has done is it is kind of, and I see this wherever I go, whoever I meet or take a few minutes to sit down and talk with, I see the results of this stress. And the stress takes the most common form is self-doubt. And we know if you're going to compete in anything, even with yourself, self-doubt is the mind killer. It is the fear of what someone is going to say, what someone is going to do, what the future effects of what you're doing today are going to be. And that fear often paralyzes us. It puts us in quicksand. It makes us, on the path of life, look for a park bench along the way. And while we're sitting there on the park bench on the path of life, our biological clock is ticking away because we're only built biologically. This biological transducer is only built to last about 120, 130 years. We don't last that long because of various toxins and I think stress in our environment. But we are built to live that long. And if we had it in our hearts and we had it in our minds that we were going to live productive lives like that, I mean, when my grandparents were as old as I am, they were freaking old. They were old. They limped. They were hunched over. They had no endurance. They, slept 10, 12 hours a day. They hadn't worked in years. I can't relate to that. I don't relate to that. In fact, I know a lot of people my age, okay, maybe just a little bit younger than me, And they're not old at all. We're still, riding motorcycles. I rode 120 miles yesterday. I rode to the zoo, which is in another city, and walked with my grandkids about 200 miles. So just shy of 200 miles we walked. Up hills, down hills. Okay, maybe it wasn't 200 miles, but for someone my age, it was 200 miles. And yes, we saw the giraffes and the lizards, and we saw the rhinos and the bison, and yeah, we saw all that. And the grandkids probably don't remember very much, but that's okay. It builds a memory we don't understand yet. And I can tell you, of all the things that you will invest in your life, all the stocks, all the bonds, all the properties that you buy or vehicles that you fix up and sell, there's nothing that repays as well as taking those little vacations with your kids, because they don't remember. They don't remember so much the scoldings. They don't remember, getting up late for school. They don't remember being grounded. They don't remember, getting money for their A's on their report card. They don't remember any of that stuff, as well as they remember those little mini vacations, the ones you take just a Saturday. It's a long time for a little kid, a whole Saturday. Or, a 3-day family vacation, just like a weekend someplace like Dollywood, or someplace you can drive to and drive back from. Go camping with your kids or fishing with your kids. They remember that stuff forever, and it builds in them. It creates a treasure for them. And what do you need the treasure for? Well, people ask me that question all the time. The treasure is for the park benches. The treasure is for the park benches along life's pathway. Because the pathway is long, and most people start on their pathway from the front, from the entrance. Here's the entrance to the path. Take your first step. This is the pathway toward, being a dentist. This is the pathway toward being a school teacher or a mechanic or a welder or an engineer. This is the pathway. But, there's a lot of forks in that pathway, and whatever we think when we're entering that pathway, first making out our syllabus or whatever we're going to study in school, we don't know where that path's going to come out. We don't even know when it's going to come out. That's because most people build that pathway as they go. They don't go out to the other side of the pathway and look back. Go to the future. Look back from the future to where you are right now. That's the way to really do it. I'll teach you how to do that someday, especially if you take my class. And yes, we are going to have a class in May. So please check out the website, the brooksagnew.blog, and then click on webinars and sign up for the Manifestation Masterclass. You can learn a little bit about how to pathfind from the future. But let's talk a little bit about the park bench, because some people stay there an inordinate amount of time. They don't just catch their breath. They set up shop. They want people to bring them food while they're sitting on the park bench. They want people to provide them housing while they're sitting on the park bench. They want people to take care of the things that would normally be their responsibility, their own care and feeding, while they're sitting on the park bench. Because we do something as humans that no other beast, no other creature on the face of the earth does. We can perceive time. We can perceive space, and we can become aware of ourselves in that space. Past, present, future, other futures, parallel futures. We could become aware of all that. And as we become aware, we begin to do something naturally. We begin to judge ourselves. And yes, as by habit and maybe by society, we judge others. We blame others. And I've talked to you before about the 5-sided die, like a die like you roll dice. Well, it's not easy to build. In fact, I don't think it's possible to build, but you could imagine a 5-sided die, okay? Like a 5-sided die inside of the 8 ball. You're going to shake the 8 ball. and it's going to come up to an answer that floats to the top that you can read. And the 5 answers are to basically the same question. And the question is, how much of your life do you think is fate written down for you, that you have a plan and then somebody's made out this plan and you're just here, breathing and eating food and generating sewage as a player of that play. And you're either going to be on script or going to be off script, but nevertheless, that's your life and you're stuck with it. So, or you believe that you have some control in what you do, what you are, what you look like, what you eat, how long your hair grows, what your skin looks like, how much weight you carry, those kinds of things. Yeah, exactly right, Twitch Tweaker. And I can't say that on the air, but I get it. And you're going to get this too. You're going to understand this. Trucker Will gets this. Old Dog gets this. And I think Baba Susie gets this as well. The first choice, the first roll of the die, it comes up that I ask the question, and the answer is life is 100% fate, and you have no choice whatsoever in what you do, in who you are, and what you're going to be. And believe it or not, there are people who really believe this. There are really people that believe this. They live their lives this way. They don't live long lives, but they live their lives this way. The next die is the choice that, okay, 75% of life is fate, and you have 25% some wiggle room, some choice that you can make along the way. And there are some people in this. The next choice, obviously, is 50-50. Life is about half written down for you and scripted. God has a plan for you, and 50% is optional. You can do what you want to do. You can be what you want to be. And believe it or not, there's a fair amount of people in this, but I don't think that's the average. When we're looking at a normal distribution curve of data, this isn't even really the peak. This one, life is 25% fate and 75% choice. There are a lot of people out there who just truly believe that sometimes life is shit and there's nothing you can do about it. But 75% of the time, your condition is the result of choices you have made along the way. Who you decided to marry or not marry, when you decided to have children, if you decided to drink heavily to pass out, whether you decided to go to college or go to a trade school, whether you decided to work right out of high school and delay college, whether you got married before you got out of college, whether you dropped out of college, all of these choices that you made correct the path you're on until you realize you better take a bench for a little bit and think about what you're doing. And then maybe you can make some adjustments to it. A lot of people are in this camp. I think this is the peak of the bell curve, is the 75-25 crowd. But then, the final choice on the die, then there are people who think that life is 0% fate, like Twitch Tweaker, and probably several others in my chat room tonight, and life is 100% under your control. And if you think about it, there really are only 2 choices. Life is either 100% under your control or it's not. Some varying degree of it not being, but it's not, right? So I can't help anyone who believes that there is some being out there who is deciding for them or has pre-decided for them that they're going to heaven or that they're going to hell or that they don't deserve the blessings of life. They're going to be frustrated, poor, and a failure their entire life in everything, in their interpersonal relationships, in business and education. They're going to get it wrong. And I thought of this song The song is written by a very gifted woman. I say gifted. She's a very talented songwriter and an extremely gifted singer. But she has physical problems. She has problems with her immune system. She has to shy away from people. She's kind of a germaphobe because of that. And, she's probably not going to live to be an old woman, but she's a magnificent performer. And every single time I hear her sing, it wells me up. She's so powerful. So I'm not going to sing to you, obviously, but I'm going to read you the words to this song because it's the song for the park bench, okay? It's when you're along the path and you've decided that you need to reflect. When I was a scoutmaster, I used to tell my scouts at the end of a day, we're sitting around the campfire and they've been going for merit badges and they've been rappelling and canoeing and they're being challenged. They're being challenged all day long. And some of the challenges they make and some of the challenges they have to try again tomorrow. But at the end of the day, we're sitting around the fire because I think that most manly conversations need to take place around a fire, something primal about that. But we would do what we call the thorn, the bud, and the rose. And we would ask each individual scout, what is your thorn for the day? What really pricked you? What really made you sore, not wanting to do that again? And they would say, well, it's this one thing. I had a real challenge with this, or I had a real problem with this. And, of course, the adults do it too. But then we ask them, what is your rose? What is the rose? What is the best thing that happened today? Did you make the turn without knocking anybody out of the boat? Did you swim the lap without a life vest on? Did you rappel without having to be lowered to the ground? What was your rose for the day? What was the one thing you succeeded at today? And then we ask them the most important question, because this is where humans differ from other animals. Other animals believe, yes, I just had a really good meal, and now I'm going to take a nap. Okay? And they're driven by their passions. They're driven by whatever is happening now. Whatever female walks by, whatever male challenges them, their life is driven by their passions. And there are a lot of humans like this too. They don't have control over that at all. They're just driven to and fro by whatever's happening now. And if they happen to live through the day, it's a good day. We ask them, what was your bud? What is you didn't finish today? You planted something today, or you saw it almost come to fruition, but it's going to happen tomorrow or the next day. What was your bud? What's your hope for the next day? And man, I got to tell you, in the 6 years, 18 boys, we got 6 Eagle Scouts out of those 18 boys, the answers to that question are the treasures of the universe. And that's what I want you to do on that park bench. That bench is along that path, and believe me, my legs were hurting yesterday, and I was looking for a bench. Didn't take one. Nope, I leaned on the stroller instead of the bench, but I'm paying for it today. But I want you to think of this song. I want you to think of the words that this writer, whose name is Lauren Daigle, I'm sure you know who she is. If you haven't, I'm sure you're going to, but Google it right now. She wrote this song called You Say. And the first time I heard it, I'm riding down the road listening to, my Sirius XM, and I'm listening to a blend channel, which is kind of a blend of country and, Maroon 5 and one thing and another. And Lauren Daigle comes on and she sings this song. And the first time I heard it, I went, wow, that's a pop song. It's a pop sound. But those words are really powerful. So I didn't catch her name the first time I heard the song. So a few days later, as Sirius XM is wont to do, they have kind of a soundtrack that probably lasts for 3 hours. They repeat it. Well, I was in the truck long enough that week that I got to hear the song again. And this time I listened for her name and I got it. So I started watching her videos and this came out. These are the words. You tell me in the chat room if you resonate with this, or you can call. The phone number's up there. It's 213-233-3998. I will watch the call board and see if anybody pops up. I don't know if it's going to work or not because the studio's kind of, blank right now. We'll find out in about 6 minutes. Here are the words. Pay close attention to this. I keep fighting voices in my mind that say I'm not enough. Every single lie that tells me I will never measure up. Am I more than just the sum of every high and every low? Remind me once again just who I am, because I need to know. You say I am loved when I can't feel a thing. You say I'm strong when I think I'm weak. And you say I am held when I am falling short and when I don't belong. You say I am yours. Yeah, I believe. I believe. What you say of me, I believe. Very powerful words. The only thing that matters now is everything you think of me. In you, I find my worth. In you, I find my identity. You say I'm loved when I can't feel a thing. You say I'm strong when I think I'm weak. You say I'm held when I'm falling short. When I don't belong, you say I am yours. I believe. I believe what you say of me. I believe. Taking all I have, and now I'm laying it at your feet. You have every failure, God. You have every victory. You say I am loved when I can't feel a thing. You say I'm strong when I'm weak. You say I'm held when I'm falling short. When I don't belong, you say I am yours. I believe. I believe what you say of me. I believe. That's what we got to say when we're on that bench. Because we're not alone in this. I'm here. You're there. There are others that you travel with through the universe. Age after age after age. We are with you. And there are others that have gone before us and laid the way. There's a story of a king, a mighty king. And at the end of his reign, before he became old and feeble, he decided to do something really great for his kingdom. So he commissioned the building of a highway from one end of his kingdom to the other so people could travel and move and haul goods and stuff. Well, he worked and worked and worked and finally finished the highway. And he decided to commemorate it with a contest, a kingdom-wide contest. Who can travel the highway best? And so the day came, and people came from everywhere. There were parades, and there were marching bands, and there were prancing horses, and there were acrobats, and there were singers, and thousands of people traveled all day long. And as the sun began to go down, the crowd along the highway began to thin. It got down, and the king was waiting at the end of the highway. And finally, just as the sun was going down, one man finished the highway, and he was carrying a bag with him. And he came up to the king, and he laid the bag at the king's feet. And the king said, "What is this?" And the man said, "Well, I was traveling the highway along with everyone else, but along the way I saw this pile of debris, this leftover material, and I decided to move it to the side of the road, clear the pathway. And when I got to the bottom, I found this bag, And in the bag is gold, and I thought I would bring it to you because it belongs to you. And the king said, Oh, no, my good man. The gold is yours. Because you see, the gold belongs to he who makes it easier for those who follow. That's what we do. That's what we do. We're pushing through all of this darkness. All of the things that are being thrown at us by this global syndicate, from the shadow banning, which is the least of it, to bioweapons, to threats of nuclear war, to lawfare, to economic terrorism that's being committed against us, our wealth and our dollars and our savings being robbed from us. All of that, we have to move this out of the way to make it easier for those to follow. Those who follow. That is what we're supposed to be doing. Sooner or later, hopefully rather than later, we get off the park bench. We decide to stand up and resume the path. Don't reside on the park bench. Rest? Yes, we all need rest. We all need a hug along the way. We all need love along the way. But remember this song. Remember the words where it says, you say I'm loved when I can't feel a thing. I know you have been there. You say I'm strong when I think I'm weak. Yes, I do. You are way stronger than you think, because you wouldn't be here if you weren't. You paid a mighty price to be here. And I don't want to dissuade you from dreaming. I think dreaming is one of the great rewards of being mortal, because we can't see very far. We can't hear very far. Oh, we hear rumors, and we have telescopes and microscopes and, even listening devices. But truth be known, our biological transducer is limited in its ability to interpret the universe on purpose. The rest of the universe we perceive by dreaming. The rest of the universe we build by dreaming. So don't give up. Don't give up. I didn't write my first book until I was 52 years old. Yeah, I've written 11 now. If I can do it, you can do it. Okay? All right, let's move on. We're supposed to be at break now, but obviously the cart at Truth Frequency Radio is not working right now, so we're going to move on. I want to talk a little bit about water. In fact, let me take a drink of water. You have no idea how 200 or 120 miles on a motorcycle will dry your mouth out. It's wind therapy. We call it an iron supplement. It's good for you, whether you're riding or driving. So our sun is quite a bit older than the Earth in our solar system. The planets, I don't think, formed around this sun. They joined up this sun, floating around the Milky Way galaxy. Most of the planets in this galaxy are known as rogue planets. That is to say, they're not orbiting around any star. They're just floating through space. And eventually what's going to happen is they're going to kind of fall into the gravity funnel of a gravitational body, and they're going to assume an orbit around that sun. And that orbit is going to be determined mostly by the size of that planet. The larger it is, the further out it has to orbit from the sun, right? Because if it gets too close, it has to orbit really fast. Otherwise, the angle of momentum is such that it will fall into the sun. Does that happen? Well, yeah, I imagine it probably does happen, but bodies don't approach each other straight on in space. They approach each other from an angle because of gravity, and what happens is they end up dancing in space. They end up coalescing around one another. Now, two very heavy gravity things like neutron stars, they have a lot of density, a lot of mass, 4, 5, 10, 20 times the size of our sun. They have a lot of gravity, and it's very difficult for them to assume a safe orbit, and so they end up combining. And when they combine, they explode in a massive nova. But planets are not that dense. They're not that large. Jupiter is probably typical of most successful solar systems. You have to have a Jupiter to be kind of a asteroid vacuum in a successful solar system, or you're not going to have life, because otherwise the other floating bodies through space, which are not very large, baseball size or the size of city buses, they slam into planets and they create havoc. The moons are covered in craters that we can view, and some of them are pretty recent, like within 25,000 years or less. Earth is the same way, but Earth has an atmosphere. However, asteroids the size of a city bus can go through our atmosphere. They've got enough mass. They're not going to burn up, and they'll actually strike the surface. So what happens to these asteroids that have that amount of mass? Well, they get caught up in Jupiter's gravity. Jupiter grabs them and either pulls them off course where it misses us, or it attracts into Jupiter and slams into Jupiter, and Jupiter's none the worse for wear. So Baba Susie said, had a spa day with healing waters with the grandkids. So Brooke's story, Out of This World, is perfect tonight. Thank you so much. Water, however, is actually older than the sun. You consider this next time you pick up a fresh glass of water. Some of the molecules in that water are actually billions of years old, way older than the sun. Much older than our solar system, in fact. And it seems impossible at first. How could water on Earth predate the solar system in which it exists? You go back to Genesis, and you remember it says, and the Spirit of the Lord moved across the deep and divided the waters from the waters. Right? This is the creation story. So you picture in your mind a sort of water planet that gets divided in two. And then one of them is moved away. A firmament, stars are put between the two bodies of water. It means that one of them was taken and moved. In the Birth trilogy, we talk about it being moved through the rift in the Milky Way to here, to merge with the planet that was already here around orbit of this sun. Quite a cataclysmic merging in space, and it probably took 7 months for that to settle down. And if you look at Earth from a certain angle in space, you can't hardly see any land. Maybe just a little bit up there at the tangent, but the entire rest of the planet is water. If you were to approach Earth from that side passing by, you would say, there's no life here. This is just a water planet. You wouldn't even see any of the continents. Astronomers arrived at this conclusion by proving that water in our solar system had to have been produced inside the thick cloud of gas and dust that preceded and was thus required for the formation of the star we know as the sun. This means that the water that finally made its way to Earth through, frozen bits of planet, such as asteroids or comets, existed before the sun exploded into a star. Ted Bergen, who's an astronomy professor at University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and one of the study's authors, described the discovery as extraordinary. If you look back 4.6 billion years ago, there's an incredible story to be told. Earth was formed from microscopic particles little larger than the width of a human hair. Astronomers, who Bergen says are very imaginative souls, call this dust. Now, this is one version. I have another, but let's go with this for a little bit. These dust particles would collect so much energy from the sun that their distance from it, at their distance from it, that they would become too hot for water to condense on them as ice. This means that when Earth was born, it was dry. So that's an interesting problem. Where did the water come from? Well, Dr. Bergen, you should read the Birth Trilogy. It will tell you where the water came from. If we consider the matter more generally, Bergen asserts, we must ask, where did all the water in the cosmos originate from? The universe isn't made of water, it is made of atoms. So at some place, at some time, these atoms came together in the universe via chemistry to form water. H2O, one oxygen atom and two hydrogen atoms. They form a natural and quite strong bond. Fortunately, astronomers can investigate that chemistry in Earth-based laboratories. They are capable of reproducing the circumstances that result in the formation of water. They do this using a process known as isotopic fingerprinting. They do this using a process known, the second kind is deuterium. These elements coexist in a more or less stable ratio throughout the solar system. For every deuterium atom, that is one hydrogen proton and one proton and one hydrogen, or one electron. One proton, one neutron, and one electron. These elements coexist in a more or less stable ratio, obviously. There are about 100,000 hydrogen atoms. Water has around this amount of hydrogen and deuterium. But chemistry tells us, I don't really know what that means, 100,000. Like there's uncountable amounts of hydrogen in the universe. But chemistry tells us that under very specific conditions, there can be an excess of deuterium. That's what we call isotopic fingerprint. Earth contains a surplus of deuterium, as do comets and asteroids. Isotopic fingerprint appears only at very low temperatures. That's between about 10 and 20 degrees above absolute zero, 10 or 20 Kelvin, which is minus 440 degrees Fahrenheit. So because the Earth has this excess of deuterium, we know one thing already, that whatever the source of water was, it was really, really cold. So now we have to look at a star and a planet formation and ask, where is it that cold? When a star starts to develop, temperatures may get so low in just two locations inside the enormous violent system. Within the cloud of gas and dust that surrounds the protostar, or within the accretion disk, this is the sort of large swirling disk that surrounds it. I suppose I could put a picture of it up here so you can see it. This is an accretion disk. There is one more twist. Water is also created by a chemical process called ionization. Researchers established that the disk is incapable of powering this chemical reaction by examining a comprehensive model of it. The particles are too far apart. Yes, it's an accretion disk, but there could be 50 miles between these particles. This is a big, big area of space. So they're not close enough to one another, kind of like if you look at our ionosphere, yeah, there's a lot of particles up there, ozone and other particles are up there, other molecules are up there, but they're not close enough to combine. It's very low pressure. They're up around 80,000, 100,000, 120,000 feet. It's very thin up there, not a lot of interaction between that. So you don't have a lot of chemical reaction in the ionosphere, and you don't in accretion disks either. Therefore, the water with the isotopic fingerprint could only have emerged from the gas and dust about 1 million years before the formation of the sun, which means not much energy, very, very cold. This begs the issue of how this water reached Earth. Again, Dr. Bergen, read the Birth Trilogy. You'll get it. You'll get it. But according to Bergen, planets are generated from the same cloud of gas and dust that collapses and ignites to form a star. obviously not enough mass to become a star, so it becomes a planet. But within the cloud, rocks were thrown into space and collided with particles that eventually created Earth, as matter attracts matter, and that's what we think. That's how we think gravity works. And additional boulders flung our way from a greater distance, and these rocks were chilly enough to contain water, because very low energy, that water's not going anywhere. It's not coming apart. It's frozen. So as Earth was being born, these rocks from greater distances supplied the water. The water became part of the rocks, and it just outgassed via volcanoes, and that created the oceans and the atmosphere and this wonderful planet that we have today. Well, he's leaving out a lot of stuff, and he is what we call a humanist. Humanism as opposed to catastrophism. I talk about this in the book, but here's the basic difference. Let's say you have a graduated cylinder. You know what that is, right? It's like a cylinder, but it has graduations on it, so you can tell precisely how much water or how much liquid is in the graduated cylinder. And we put the graduated cylinder in a kitchen sink underneath the faucet. And then we turn the faucet. The observer comes into the room and notices that there's water in the graduated cylinder and that the faucet is dripping. That's what he notices. He comes along and this is what he sees. And so he begins to surmise, ask the question, how long has that graduated cylinder been sitting there, really? Well, he thinks about it, and he takes out a stopwatch and he counts the number of drops per minute. 20 drops per minute. Well, okay, that's about 1 cubic centimeter per minute, 1 milliliter per minute. And this graduated cylinder holds 100 milliliters, and right now there's about 42 milliliters in it. So if I multiply 42 times 20, I could say that this graduated cylinder has been here 840 minutes. And that would be a humanist way of looking at things. Humanism basically says the forces that are working on the set that you're looking at are the same forces that have always been working on it. And so you can look at a small window and extrapolate back a larger scale and say these forces have always worked on this, the same forces that are working on it right now. And so we can say it's been here for 840 minutes. However, the catastrophist does not discount the possibility that someone was in the room before the observer got there, turned on the faucet, ran about 38 milliliters into it, shut the faucet off, and left it dripping and left the room. And the faucet's actually only been there about 12 minutes. You see the difference? Both had the same result. Both have the same result. A graduated cylinder with 42 milliliters of water in it and a drip every 3 seconds. But the humanist is handicapped because he's looking at the finished product and he's backscaling it. That's what Dr. Bergen's doing. He's looking at Earth and he's noticing that some of this isotopic water is in our set of water on this planet. And he says to himself, hey, this water came from somewhere far away, and it's very old, older than the star itself in our solar system, because it wouldn't exist if the sun was here. And he's saying, this is how long the Earth has been here, or this is how long water has been here. We're pretty sure Earth's been here about 4.5 billion years. Just saying. We're pretty agreed on that. There's a consensus on that. I know there's an aspect to Earth that's been here for 6,000 years. I get that. But the actual Earth, 4.5 billion years. But he does not take into consideration the catastrophism that some huge body of water, probably the size of our moon or bigger, merged with Earth some 7,000 years ago and flooded this planet And if you look at the way mountains are laid out from space, you look at the way canyons and seafloors are formed, and it really adds a lot of credence to the catastrophist way of looking at the way Earth was formed. The mountain ranges that we can see from space look very much like the ridges of sand on the beach when the wave goes back under the undertow. It's because of that sinusoidal kind of vibration that occurs with moving water. It's just something that occurs. It doesn't make a nice flat sheen. It has a tendency to roll over itself and create these ripples. That's what we see in the mountain ranges, only very, very much larger. And you're right, Stoker. Higher vibrations is what we're talking about here. Higher vibrations. Catastrophism as opposed to humanism. One is, I think, sort of the dark, cold way of looking at space, and the other one is the living, dynamic way of looking at space. All right, let's... thanks for reminding me, because I had the break screen up there because I was demonstrating to you what an accretion disk is. Thank you, Comfortably Numb, for letting me know I had to go back to my other screen. I guess I probably could have gone to this screen. That would have been just as good. All right. Let's talk about our signature story tonight, and that is the Netflix blues. Now, I'm going to have to go really deep into this because a lot of it has to do with economics, but I think a lot of it has to do with the politics of business. Hollywood was kind of an extension of the Roman idea or the philosophy that was inherited from, I think, other worlds by the global syndicate, which has been around for thousands of years on this planet. That one of the ways to buy time and one of the ways to fool the masses so you don't have to go kill them is to entertain them. And the Romans used to call it bread and games. You give people a little something to eat and some games to watch, and they're satiated, right? Yeah, 6,000-year-old death cult, kind of basically that. But it's more than that, because what they're trying to do is capture the souls that come to Earth. You can't do that just by killing people. You have to get them to waste their life. And so I grew up near Hollywood. Wasn't ever a professional actor or anything like that, but I know the business pretty well because I grew up around it. And I will tell you this. For all the talent, for all the acting, for all the beauty, for all the fame, it is all about money in Hollywood. Yeah, there are people that are bottom feeders, that take advantage of starlets who want an Oscar, and they take advantage of young boys who want to be a singer or want to be an actor. There are bottom feeders. They just gravitate to that kind of world. But when it comes to Hollywood, when it comes to the studios, what they were making as far as movies, it comes down to one thing and one thing only, and that is money. Now, they know you're going to go to the theater and you're going to watch the movie and you're going to pay to watch the movie, and that money is going to be divided up between the studio, the actors, the theater, and all the union workers involved in the system. But so many of you go and so many of you pay that $7.50 or $12.50 or $20 to see that movie. Millions of you. That money comes back to the studio. Plus there's, all kinds of merchandise and all that stuff they get money off of. Now, when you go to get money to shoot a film, let's just think of a movie that costs, let's say $50 million. That's not a huge movie. It's not like Waterworld, which was the first $200 million movie. It's not, Star Wars or Star Trek or some of these big screen movies with big name actors. It's not that. we're just talking a regular old $50 million movie with maybe a semi box office draw. You don't simply go to the bank and say, wow, we're going to sell all these tickets and it's going to be great. So loan us the money and we'll make this movie. It doesn't work that way. The bank's not going to loan you nothing because they'd be loaning you on box office draws that haven't happened yet. It's not going to happen. Never going to happen. You could say, well, look, we're MGM. We're worth $1 billion. We'll put up our own money, our own collateral, our studio, and we'll borrow money and make this movie. No. That's not going to happen either. They're not going to take a risk like that. That doesn't happen. So you go, well, gosh, where does the money come from? The money comes from investors. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen a movie packet. A movie packet, only people that I've ever personally known that have invested in movies. One invested in Superman, the first Superman that was out, he invested in. But the bulk of them were B-rated horror flicks. B-rated horror flicks like They Live or like, the Chainsaw Massacre. We're talking about B horror flicks. And these movies typically take $2-3 million tops. Some of them can be shot for $500,000. What do they do in the theaters? Well, they don't get huge amounts of following unless they become a cult classic like Night of the Living Dead or something like that. But the old B movies, they would make about $10-20 million in the theater. Well, do the math, folks. The movie cost $500,000 to shoot, including all the union and the post-production, the score and everything, and you make $11 million. Well, hello, that's like 20 times your money, right? See, it makes sense and makes sense for investors. And so investors play that game. And I've been to parties where they have laid movie packs out and people have said, no, that movie will never make anything. And other people will say, yeah, I like that. That's going to be a hit. And you just see the money flow. It happens. But that's not real Hollywood. Real Hollywood is up the next level where we're talking about $20 million, $80 million, $100 million to shoot a movie. Nobody has that kind of money. No investors are going to come in there and say, we'll risk our money, behind, Steve Reeves. We'll risk our money behind, some comedian, Robin Williams, or because of his star power. But hey, Johnny Depp. I mean, but stars make flops all the time. And investors are terrible at reading scripts. They read a script. I really like this script. I'm going to invest in it. That's BS. So what I'm getting to is, where does the money come from? The money, believe it or not, in Hollywood, most of it, over the last 100 years, or not 100 years, but since the late 40s, came from the CIA. Does that sound weird? Came from the CIA. And it most recently started coming from DARPA. You're thinking to yourself, what? That's bullshit. What in the world would the CIA be doing investing in movies? Because the movies, the games, the entertainment is where the CIA begins to set the narrative. They're setting the mood of the people, either getting them ready for war, breaking down family values, getting them ready for recession, getting them ready for conflict in the streets. These movies are the ones that inspire the youth, that enrage the adolescent, that put into despair the elderly, right? It's the movies. So the CIA invests in movies. And what do? They look at the script and they say, well, we like the script, we like the actors, but we want you to change this, put this in, put that in, write these lines, and then the money comes in. That is called getting bought. In Hollywood, it's called getting a movie bought. Once the movie's bought, things begin to happen. Okay? I was talking with an actor who you all know. He's a fine actor. He's not a great actor, but he's what we can afford, and he fits the part very well. So in communicating with him about playing President Riker, which is one of the main characters in the Birth trilogy, goes all the way through all 1,100 pages of the series. And he would be in probably 35 of the 42 scripts for 3 seasons. And I showed him 3 of the scripts. He liked the scripts. He liked the storyline. He liked the theme of it, what the unsolvable problem was and what mankind was going to go through. And he especially liked the deep spiritual tones of the message of the movies, of the series. But then he said something that reminded me of what I'm telling you right now. He said, when you're fully funded, you call me back. Until you're fully funded, don't write me again. That's called getting bought. Now, have I got my letter from the CIA? Have I got my check from the CIA? No, I have not. Nor would I accept it, because it's called, in Hollywood, we call this the men in suits. When the men in suits show up, that's where the deal is made. This isn't made at the Starbucks. It's not made at the Italian restaurant. No, it's not made at Hugh Hefner's, although blackmail, and that is a large part of this game as well. No, it's made when the suits show up. And the government, the taxpayers are the ones that funded Hollywood. And it was that way for a long time. For a long time, 50, 60 years it was like that. From the 20s up till about the 80s. And then something began to happen. The global syndicate needed to get bigger. It wasn't just Hollywood and the U.S. market anymore. It began to be Hollywood and the global market. And we're not talking about just Europe, because American movie stars are really, popular in Europe as well. It was Asia. It was China. China became a huge entertainment audience. And you think to yourself, why? Why would Chinese go to movies? Oh, you're missing the point. Remember, we're talking about entertainment and bread. The Chinese Communist Party needs to keep 1.3 billion Chinese thinking the same thing. They need to keep them along the same theme. And that theme is China doesn't lose. China wins. North Korea bad, Mexico bad, cartels bad, not China. China's never to blame. China's good. And so what did China do? China, at first, they bought Sony. And then they bought MGM. And then they bought the next studio and the next studio. And now you can't make a movie in Hollywood that disparages China. You remember the first Red Dawn with Patrick Swayze and Wolverines? You remember that movie? It was a kind of a B movie. It wasn't really a big box office draw. It did way better as a video rent. But who was it that attacked? Right. It was the Soviets, right? It was the bad Soviets. And who did the Soviets team up with? The Cubans, right? Everything. It was like Cubans and Soviets. And that was what, attacked our country and just about drove it into slavery and gulags, and it was the Wolverines and the partisans that won the day at the end of the movie. Well, why make one good movie when you can make 2? And so they make Red Dawn again, Red Dawn 2. And who was it that was supposed to attack in Red Dawn 2? You know, the one I'm talking about with Chris Hemsworth. Well, you know who it was, right? It was the Chinese. The Chinese were supposed to attack. Except that didn't happen. What happened is, as the movie was going into production, a lot of it had already been shot. The Chinese stepped forward, put money into the project, and said, no. That's not going to be China that attacks the U.S. It's going to be North Korea. Really? Who's going to believe that? Nobody. And the movie was a complete flop. The movie was a complete flop because nobody believed it. Because North Korea is this big, it's as big as that. It's just tiny. There's no threat from North Korea taking over the world. Just not. And so the movie flopped. It didn't get the momentum because it wasn't believable. The first one was, and the first one was fun, and even though the acting was not really that good and the script was for shit and the music was terrible and the sound effects were awful, the theme resonated with people. We were mad at the Soviets, right? We wanted to get mad at the Chinese and they didn't let us. So the movie flopped. I know, TFR is not showing up. I get it. They're having technical issues. It's okay. We're streaming on other formats, and if this gets recorded in TFR and they send it out, wonderful. If it doesn't get recorded, then it's out on these other venues. But we are a faithful TFR host. We've been here for a lot of years, and we're not going to give up now. So just hang in there. Just hang in there, folks. We're going to start our second hour right now. All right, let's talk about the Netflix blues, because this is something that is affecting us all right now. The party down at Netflix Central is over. It's officially over. And this is following a disastrous first quarter that saw the Far Syndicate streamer lose 200,000 subscribers and predict the loss of a whopping 2 million more in the months ahead. And I think that's kind of light. I think it's going to be more than that. And we saw this coming. We did. You can only buy up all the old content, all the old I Love Lucy's and all of the, Farscape and all the, you can buy them all for a song because the studios owned them. No one was watching them. They were streaming maybe on public TV at 2 o'clock in the morning. Netflix bought them all and said, well, there's a lot of people that haven't seen this or want to see it again, and so they will stream it. And they did. And Netflix went screaming to the top. But now Netflix is embarking on a course correction that involves reining in its spendthrift ways by slashing spending and cutting back on new programming with a focus on quality over quantity, according to a report in the Wall Street Journal. In some cases, budgets on new shows will be cut by as much as 25%. CEO Reed Hastings, he's actually the co-CEO at Netflix, he says, well, it's a bitch. Netflix has overspent lavishly over the years to build its streaming empire, borrowing tens of billions of dollars to fund its original content. The new season of the popular sci-fi series Stranger Things, let me put this in perspective. The Birth trilogy will cost somewhere around between $100,000 and maybe $200,000 per episode. There are a few of them that require a lot of CGI, and so they're going to be more expensive, but the rest of them, it is all writing and acting and, good old-fashioned entertainment. A lot like Grimm. You saw the Grimm series. Okay, these are not a whole lot of special effects, some morphing and stuff like that, but basically a decent budget. And Stranger Things, and I'll tell you a story about Stranger Things. Stranger Things, each episode is costing $30 million. $30 million per episode for Stranger Things. That's to produce it, according to the Journal. The Irishman. I don't know who's watched The Irishman. I haven't, because I don't like Robert De Niro. But The Irishman, who's directed by Martin Scorsese, it's believed to have cost Netflix $225 million. The entire 42 episodes of the Birth trilogy will probably cost less than $10 million over 3 years. And it's going to be amazing. The streamer also threw obscene amounts of money at the A-list talent to entice them to make Netflix their creative home. Ryan Murphy is estimated to have been paid as much as $300 million. And guess how many hits he's produced for the company? None. $300 million. Folks, that's enough to retire on about 30 times over. Going forward, Netflix will prioritize programs with the biggest return, not the biggest reach, according to the Journal. A key internal metric for success will be the ratio of a program's viewership to its budget. We should right-size budgets depending on what the creative dictates and what the size of the audience is. Well, here's the thing, Netflix. You need to face reality. Nobody knows what the viewership is until after you produce the work. Okay? You can't say that. You cannot say, this is going to be a hit, this is not going to be a hit. You have to wait until it comes out. And one advantage that you have, Netflix, that movies don't have, is movies are basically launched on season. Like the biggest hit of the summer, or the Christmas movie, or the Thanksgiving movie, right? Or the Labor Day movie. They're launched on seasonal nodes. And oftentimes they go up against other great movies. Like you remember when Armageddon came out? What came out with it? Deep Impact. Both movies launched at the same time. One had Bruce Willis and the other had Morgan Freeman. So you say to yourself, my God, what's going on here? Two movies with the same theme, one by Michael Bay and the other one by, I can't remember what her name is. She did a magnificent job. I think Deep Impact was the better movie, even though it didn't have as good a, music. I think it was well done. And I thought the acting was pretty good. I thought Elijah Wood did a great job. Morgan Freeman did a great job. I mean, it was a good movie. It was well written. It was very poignant. But both movies launched at the same time. So guess who got hurt? Both movies got hurt because they both launched at the same time. Netflix doesn't have that problem because once it's up on Netflix, it doesn't have to make its money that first weekend. It could take a year for it to make money. You know, they didn't even mention The Expanse. The Expanse was a wildly successful series. Wildly successful. But it wasn't Netflix that picked it up. It was Amazon. See, this is the way it goes. Now, did they know the Expanse was going to be great? No. I mean, the first episode was written and produced by the game producer, who actually had enough money to produce the first one. It went out on Sci-Fi Channel. It did okay. It didn't burn the world down. It did okay, but it built a fan base and was already a fan base from the video game. And then Amazon picked it up, put money to it, took the special effects to the next scale. The acting really improved. The camera work improved. And the series went for 5 seasons. Stranger Things, okay, you got Winona Ryder in it, and I'm okay with her. I think she's okay. I think she's a little bit of a has-been, but okay. And the kids, especially the girl up and coming, started up, and she's turned into a star in her own. But these are the series that they're mentioning. These are where they're hanging their hat. I can tell you right now, Netflix or Amazon or anyone else out there, you do $300 million productions for the small screen and you are going to go broke. You're going to go broke. What do you have to do different? And by the way, they didn't mention how much money they spent on the Obamas, right? Barack and Michael hired on at Netflix. And what did they do? They turned it into a big woke political enterprise. And what did the people do? They fired Netflix. They fired him. They said, we're not watching this crap. We're going to Hulu. We're going to someplace else. Look at Disney. Oh my gosh, Disney was wiped out in the last 3 months. Wiped out. They may just delist altogether. They can't weather that. What does that leave? Hulu and Roku and some of the others? Yeah. So who are we talking to? Is my entertainment attorney talking to about the Birth Trilogy? I don't know. We haven't had a single meeting, not even a single text message from a network executive. So what does that tell me? It tells me all the networks are doing it wrong. They're all operating off of a budget that comes from either the CIA or DARPA or these darker forces that don't want good content to come out. They're trying to make money for their shareholders, but they're not allowed to. So Netflix is just going to look to lower their costs, right? When licensing shows it doesn't own from the outside studios and production companies. One studio executive with multiple shows at the streamer told the Journal that in some cases Netflix is looking to reduce budgets on new shows by 25%. That is a recipe for suicide. Netflix now has to compete against streamers with more resources at their disposal. Disney, Amazon, of course, Disney is one of the top 6, media heads, and Amazon, which is a behemoth in its own right. And to that end, the company expects to spend more than $20 billion this year on content. Well, then I expect a phone call. We already have 3 bestsellers out there. The audience is already there. The story is ready-made. We've already talked to actors. We've already talked to directors. We've already won screenplay contests. It's time. So that's my frustration with Netflix. Who owns Twitch? That is a good question. Who did I hear the other day that owns Twitch? Twitch started out as a gaming network. Okay, so there are gamers out there who would play various video games, whether it's Candy Crush or Halo, or they would play Grand Theft Auto. And what they would do is they would stream themselves playing the game. And sometimes they'd have 2 or 3 or 4 people on with the headsets. And they're communicating with one with another, some in Romanian, some in English, some in Australian, whatever. They're playing games. And what happened was the audience began to come in and watch them play games. I don't get it. I suppose I do watch people play video games, if they're playing, and I'll sit there kind of dumb and watch it, and I'll kind of hang on the edge of my seat where they're trying to win it. But believe it or not, there were like 12-year-olds and 11-year-olds out there making $10,000 a month off of revenue from people watching them play video games. YouTube started out this way too, started to really grow this way. It doesn't do that much anymore. But Twitch started out as a gamers platform. And then it morphed into, let's call it home entertainers. So people that play piano, that play guitar, that rate music instructors that are doing a review of somebody singing a song or somebody playing a song, and people would watch the review. And I've watched a couple of very talented young people who are super talented songwriters, great singers, and they have entertainment, and they play every single day 1 or 2 hours, and people tune in and watch live, and then they watch the archive, and they subscribe. What Twitch excels at is they have built a revenue engine for the person providing the content. Like right now, we have a bunch of people watching on Twitch. Hang on a second, I'll be able to tell you right now. We have about 64 people watching on Twitch right now. They're watching live. None of those 64 people subscribe to me. They all follow me, which is free. But if you subscribe to me in Twitch, it's going to cost you $3.99 a month or more. Depends on how much you write in, but $3.99 I think is the minimum. And what happens is Twitch divides that money up. Twitch keeps a little bit, and I get some. So these entertainers would, get 30,000 people watching them live, and maybe 4,000 of them subscribe. Well, do the math. That's $16,000 a month. Twitch takes a little bit, and the artist gets a little bit. So depending on what you're doing for entertainment, if you're playing guitar or if you're dancing naked, I don't think they allow that on Twitch, but you get the story. You build the audience, and you begin to earn an income. And you could sit at home at 16, 18, 19 years old and make a living. Make a pretty good living, in fact, living in your mom's basement or in a studio apartment somewhere or anywhere you want, because all you need is internet access, right? And that's the beauty of Twitch. So I don't know who owns Twitch, but Twitch about a year ago started to add podcasters. Maybe it was a little longer than that, but the podcasting audience was very small a year ago. Maybe there was 6 or 7 podcasters on there. So we started streaming on Twitch, and our audience has grown. I don't know, we have about 1,500 followers or something on Twitch. And there are other better podcasters than me that have, 25,000 or 100,000 people following them on Twitch. And I'm sure some of them actually subscribe, which means they get revenue from it. So Twitch is a good service. We love Twitch. They have very high quality archives, and we think the world of them and their business model. Another one is DLive. DLive, it was very small, only gamers, and maybe a half a dozen podcasters. We were one of the very first podcasters on DLive and started promoting them when they had the Great Purge of October of 2019. It took out all my friends, every one of them, a Space Shot and Red Pill 78, and they just wiped all these guys out. And they were making a living from this, a good living from this. And so we encouraged them to come over to DLive. They did, and the whole landscape has changed. Now, DLive is getting a little bit into, they're starting to regulate their cryptocurrency. They don't let us trade cryptocurrency anymore, which is a big disappointment to me and to my listeners. They also are banning content and shadow banning us. And so, we don't do very well on DLive anymore. Where we used to have a huge audience, tonight there are 27 people listening. So it's become very small again. And that's through no fault of anyone's. That's just what DLive has done. And of course, YouTube always hangs out there, but we have no idea what goes on at YouTube. We have 20,000 followers at YouTube. Tonight we have probably less than 40 people listening live. In the next week, maybe 1,000 will pick it up. But we don't even think that's real. When we were on iHeartRadio, I used to get iHeart ticks each night. I would look at the score and see how iHeart went up and down. We averaged about 5,500 people live on iHeart. And we get so many people listening on iHeart that bandwidth would start chopping. That's how many people were listening live. So it was good. We did reach out there, but that's the audio-only audience, and it's a small amount of the audience right now. That most of the audience is video. You're watching me in my library right now. And most of the people that will listen tomorrow while they're working on their favorite project, behind their spreadsheets or their blueprints or their advertising script that they're writing, they'll be listening to this program, and that's fine. All right. Let's continue on. I want to talk a little bit about the war on oil. And this has become way bigger than I thought it would become. I really thought, the internal combustion engine was here to stay. Everyone would figure out in short order what a boondoggle windmills were. It wouldn't take very long for people to figure out what a big loser solar panels are. And nuclear power is by far the most efficient, by far the biggest return on investment for any utility. And we'll go for a century of clean, renewable power production. And I'm not really sure how, and in fact, the Department of Energy, which is one of the most powerful departments in our federal government, the Department of Energy, its primary role, I would say 3/4 of the administrative operation of the Department of Energy surrounds nuclear energy. Okay? It just is. A little bit of it for oil because the oil companies kind of control the Department of Energy. And there are some activists in there, but believe me, it's a huge business, and they control what is going to come on. We were tempted just like everybody else when we developed our first electric truck way back in 2009. It was a great truck. It was fast. It was fun to drive. It handled great. Too small of a frame. Our customers wanted something bigger. So we designed our own truck frame in 2014, 5 years later. We filed our patents. We received our patents. Were granted our patents. And we built a rear-wheel drive, full-size bed cabin chassis that is exactly what our customers want. It's cheap, it's powerful, it's reliable, and it's big enough to do the work of a full-size truck. It is exactly what our customers wanted because our customers designed it. All we did is put our drive in it and build the truck. So who do we go to for grants? Well, we applied and we applied and we applied and we applied, and guess where we went? We went to the Department of Energy. We spent years, hundreds of thousands of dollars in fees and travel and shows, and went to the Pentagon half a dozen times. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Now, here's the kicker. We had 13 competitors back in those days, 13 of them. Guess how many got Department of Energy grants? None. Zero. Even Tesla, nada, not uno centero. What Tesla did get was a $70 million loan guarantee. That's a little bit different than a loan, but it's a loan guarantee nonetheless, and it allowed Tesla to borrow money based on what they were going to produce. And when they turned in their invoices to get paid, the Department of Energy slow-walked that payment. What does that mean? Well, you turn in your bill. Let's say you turn in a bill the 1st of April for $900,000. The Department of Energy, and that's 1st of April in 2022, the Department of Energy wouldn't pay that invoice until January of 2023. Yeah. 8 months would go by, and they would delay, and they would ask questions, and they would want clarifications, and 8 months would go by. Meanwhile, Tesla Motors is still in business, and in May, they borrow more money, and they submit another invoice, this time for $1 million. And then they borrow money in June for $750,000. So you see, it's starting to build up. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the banks are going, hey, dudes, you're going to default on this if we don't make a payment pretty soon. And you got Tesla Motors saying, well, look, it's not our fault. We have the $70 million loan guarantee, but the Department of Energy is not paying. Okay, they're slow-walking everything. They're not living up to their end of the contract. And so it became apparent at Tesla Motors that the Department of Energy was intent on destroying Tesla Motors. They were starving them, choking them off. And at the same time, Citigroup was naked shorting their stock. Not a little bit either, like 100 million shares. And Tesla was only worth $23 a share in those days. It didn't take long at Tesla Motors. We started to say, wow, we think Elon Musk lost his $41 million. Toyota lost their $50 million that they put into Tesla Motors. Everybody was going to lose because the stock was dropping and it was going to delist. Delist means it's worth goose eggs. Nothing. Nada. It drops off the market. Tesla Motors disappears forever. And, of course, they employed the use of market makers. Market makers are individuals whose opinion is valued in the marketplace. They make the market. They make the market. So Time Magazine was the market maker. They came out and wrote a bad review on the Roadster because they abused it and ended up running out of charge on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and they had it towed, and the article was terrible, and the stock dropped another couple bucks. And we took our hats off and held it over our hearts and said, my God, we're all going to disappear. if Tesla Motors goes away, there's no hope for any of us. No hope for any of us. And Elon Musk, in his brilliance, recovered the black box off of that car, brought it back, downloaded the actual driving history that market maker had done, and it turned out he horribly abused the car. Drove at 100 miles an hour with the windows down and the cold, with the heat on full blast, and he ran the car out of charge until it died on the Pennsylvania Turnpike and had to be towed. But it turned out the car actually exceeded its design parameters. The car actually did better than what they claimed it would do. And so Elon Musk turned a pile of crap into a rose garden, and he published an article himself, and it went out over all of the press release that he could send it out on, which was substantial because people were hungry for it. And lo and behold, the stock went up. It wasn't much, $1 or $2. It didn't go up much. It wasn't like a skyrocket, but it went up. But what happened is it squeezed Citigroup, because remember, Citigroup was naked shorting the shares. They were selling shares that did not exist for less money than what the company was listed. It's called naked shorting. You put all the money in your pocket because you're never going to have to deliver those shares as long as the shares keep going down in price. But the stock didn't go down in price. It went up in price. So it squeezed Citigroup, and Citigroup had to deliver the shares that they had sold. But the shares didn't exist because Citigroup just made them up. The only place to get the shares was the market. And so Citigroup began buying off the market the shares that they had to deliver to the shareholders who had bought those naked shares. By the time that struggle was done, the stock was over $200 a share. And it wasn't very long, 1 or 2 months. In the meantime, Elon Musk very skillfully took treasury stock, which he owed nothing on, and dumped it into the market while it was climbing. So as it was climbing, that money came straight into the company. It didn't go to the shareholders. It came to the company. The company ended up reaping about $345 million in a very short order of time. What did they do with that money? They wrote a check and they paid off that loan guarantee with Department of Energy and still told them to stick it up their ass. And that's a quote. No more of that. Elon Musk had even listed the EPA and the DOE as financial risks on his 10K. Yeah, for the financial reporting. It was a big poke in their eye, let me tell you. That's the only reason Tesla Motors exists. The question is, why did it happen? It happened because at the Department of Energy, only part of the money that they get comes from the taxpayers. The rest of the money they get comes from the oil companies. Now, who owns an agency? Well, you might say, well, the voters own the agency. Bullshit. The voters have no representation in that agency at all. All those people are career people. Well, who makes up those career people? Oil executives, people from Standard Oil, people from Exxon, people from Mobil, people from BP. That's who makes up the Department of Energy. And what is their job? Their job is to keep people from competing with them. So they kill electric vehicles because electric vehicles compete against gas-powered vehicles. They kill biodiesel because biodiesel takes away from rack diesel, which is what they're selling. And that's their job. That's what they do. So we played the game. We lost. We applied, I think, for 24 grants, and we didn't get any of them. We wasted years of time and hundreds of thousands of dollars in fees. Yes, they charge you an application fee. Some of the fees are $20,000, $30,000 that you have to send in with your application. And they turn around a few hours later and say, denied, and you lose your money. You just throw it up a horse's ass. So the United States right now, here we are in April of 2022, the United States added just one. I'm just holding up a single finger here. One oil rig this week. One. Not 1,000, not even 500. One oil rig this week. You know why? Climate change activists. Climate change activists pressured investors to deny capital to fossil fuel producers. Well, you think to yourself, how the hell does that happen? The total number of oil rigs in the United States ticked up from 548 to 549. And that's data from the oil and gas services company Baker Hughes, and that was last Friday. That was 2 days ago. The Permian Basin, where new production is thought to be most likely to arise, added 0. None for the second straight week. No new oil rigs. The number of natural gas rigs in the United States climbed by only 1, rising to 144. Canada's rig count didn't rise at all. It fell by 2 to 1,010, reflecting a typical seasonal decline. Virtual Joe and his gang of criminals have said it wants more domestic oil production, but until very recently it was refusing to auction new leases for federal land. And the federal land is where all the oil, the big oil reserves are. That's why it's the federal land. The federal government seized control of the land because it contains the oil. Even as Virtual Joe announced the move, it made clear that it has contempt for fossil fuel companies and regards them as dangers to the public good. Quote, "For too long, the federal oil and gas leasing programs have prioritized the wants and extractive industries above local communities, the natural environment, the impact on our air and water, the needs of tribal nations, and moreover, other uses of our shared public lands." That's the radical, crazy, fascist Secretary Deb Haaland. That's what she said in her press release. You have to see her to believe in this. She's absolutely insane. She goes on, "Today, we begin to reset how and what we consider to be the highest and best use of Americans' resources for the benefit of all current and future generations." What the hell ever, you crazy bitch. The administration also hiked tax on oil and natural gas revenues, because they want more money, from leased lands significantly from about 12.5% to 18.75%. That's a hell of a hike. An unprecedented, absolutely unprecedented hike. Usually it goes up a quarter or maybe a half. To take it up 30% is just insanity. No president in 100 years has undertaken such an increase. And you know what that does? It raises the price of everything. It raises the price of the plastic for this bottle. It raises the price of the polyvinyl chloride pipe, which we use in our plumbing. It raises the price of our water plumbing. It raises the price of this fiber for this shirt, for these computer screens. It raises the price of milk. It raises the price of everything. And they just raised this tax by 30 freaking %. I guess I don't even need these headphones because nobody's going to call and we're not doing any commercials, so I'll just take them off. The state of Oregon came under fire on Thursday for its investments in fossil fuels. A group called Divest Oregon, and you know what they're all about. They describe themselves as a statewide grassroots coalition of individuals and organizations representing unions with PERS members and racial and climate justice groups, youth leaders, and faith communities. They issued a report lambasting the state for allegedly holding $5.3 billion of investments in fossil fuel companies. They want them to divest. Get the money back. Get the money back. Don't let them use that money. Last month, hundreds of climate activist pressure groups signed on to a report demanding banks cease all funding for fossil fuels. Of course, none of these people own cars. None of these people pay for their own utilities. A number of Biden's nominees have expressed antagonism toward the fossil fuel industry, discouraging investment in the sector by making it clear what the Democrat Party view of it is. Last year, Virtual Joe nominated to the Federal Reserve's top bank supervisory post a former Fed official. Her name was Sarah Bloom Raskin. Oh yeah, this woman's a real winner. She advocated using regulations to discourage banks from investing in fossil fuels. He also nominated syndicate wing radical academic Saul Omarova. I'm sure you've seen him. He's also called for the use of bank regulations to stop investment in fossil fuels to the Office of Comptroller of the Currency. And both nominations, fortunately, were defeated when moderate Democrats in the Senate balked. Yeah, they didn't want to go that radical. But the fact that they're trying it, the fact that they're wasting our time trying it, means what their intentions are. Perhaps most importantly, large institutions have poured money into so-called sustainable funds. Whenever you hear the word sustainable, you better make sure you're backed up against the wall and you keep your cheeks very tight together, because somebody's going to get screwed, and it ain't going to be them. Sustainable funds that look to environmental, social, and governance factors when making investment decisions. Now, all this sounds fluffy, right? It all sounds wonderful. Oh, yes, we want to take care of the environment. Oh, yes, we want electric vehicles. We really, really, really do. Well, we're sitting here with the only patented electric pickup truck in the entire country, and we've been sitting here for 13 years. 13 years, debt-free. Thousands upon thousands of municipal fleets have test-driven our truck. You know how we get funded? We play the lottery. We play the lottery. It's the only money available. These funds shun fossil fuel investing. According to Deloitte's Center for Financial Services, professionally managed assets with ESG mandates swelled to $46 trillion in 2021. $46 trillion. And represents nearly 40% of all the assets under management. And the result of this is that it has become incredibly hard to raise funds for expanding fossil fuel production. So even oil prices above $100 a barrel are not attracting capital into the sector. In a recent episode of Bloomberg's Odd Lots podcast, Goldman Sachs top commodities strategist describes ESG investing as a blunt instrument that is reducing capital flows to a very critical sector. If we stop investing in energy, the human race is going to collapse. I don't have to paint this picture very detailed for you. Everything in this country moves because of oil. Diesel fuel, rubber, brake pads, plastic. It doesn't move without those things. We're looking at a project to revise the way we use our rivers in moving containerized freight. And that's all I can tell you right now. But one of these vessels will take 10,000 semis off the road in a year. 10,000. Think of the impact. Think of what fuel 10,000 semis would consume. One vessel. It's huge. Do you think we can find funding to build that vessel? Not on your life. Not on your life. There's so much deception, so much fakery going on here. They don't care about sustainability. They don't care about renewable energy. They don't care about sustainability. The only thing they care about is power. And what they want to do is suppress society. And if you ever watch the movie, what is it, where they have forced people to live in mega cities and the rest of the world is just wilderness. What was that? Judge Dredd. That's what it was. Yes, Judge Dredd. So they have these mega cities that have like 100 million people living in them, and the cities go up to the sky, but they sit inside a wall, and then outside the city, it's nothing but wilderness. That's the idea. They want, like Shanghai right now has 30 plus million people living in it, but can you get out? No, you can't. Think about what that means. So while we are clamped down, while our trucks can't roll, while our plants cannot get plastic resin to make commodities with, everything from belts to shoes to containers and pots and just normal stuff that we use, pipe and panels. We can't make that stuff because the oil is so expensive. The market can't bear getting it. And so only the very biggest consumers are able to get their hands on the raw materials. While that's happening in this country, what is happening in China? What do you think? What do you think is happening in China when we compare what's happening here? Bob Connor makes a good point. By the way, Bob Connor's a great graphic artist. He makes the Freedom Truckers hats that I've been wearing. He said, Amazon is like Musk to me. They make me nervous. Yes, Amazon is also, I think, doomed to go bankrupt because the business model is unsustainable. It can't occur anymore. What it used to be was a marketplace for small businesses or small distributors to access the market. That's what it used to be. It used to be like a mall. But over time, what happened was Amazon looked at the small businesses that were successful. They made hand tools, or they made women's clothing, or they made kids' toys. And when they saw how successful some of the businesses that were on Amazon, that were small businesses making money on Amazon with their model, what Amazon did is they copied it, had it made in China or in Vietnam or Malaysia, and then competed against their own customers at a cheaper price and put them out of business. That is not a sustainable business model for Amazon. It isn't, because the innovation isn't coming from Amazon. The innovation is coming from the small business people who are on Amazon. They're the ones that are creating the value, that are creating the newness. Yeah, I'm going to get to that late night, Leroy. Hold on just 1 second. That's a very good point. He said airlines can't afford to fly with $100 a barrel oil. It's true. Of course, they'll just raise the prices, and then what will happen is people will stop flying. And that's, again, not a sustainable business model. Truth is, the light is exactly right. Chinese are building coal plants as we speak. Chinese state media announced 3 days ago that coal production is going to increase. You're not going to believe this. I got to hold on to my own hat here. Chinese coal production is going to increase by 300 million tons this year. 300 million tons. That's not increase to 300 million tons. That's an increase of 300 million tons. Yes. Of course, it's making an absolute mockery of the green industry. Chinese is selling us solar panels. Chinese are selling us wind generators. But Chinese are increasing coal production by 300 million tons. The Chinese government enjoys lecturing the rest of the world about climate change and signing high-profile global warming treaties with gullible and opportunistic Western leaders like Virtual Joe and his gang of criminals. But when the rubber meets the road, Chinese steely-eyed rulers will do whatever the hell they want to keep their factories running. And if that means burning epic amounts of high-pollution coal, and it's not low-sulfur coal like we have, both within Chinese borders and across its third-world interests like South Africa. Chinese state-run Global Times, they reported at a meeting which energy experts said China spent 2021 learning a lesson because President Donald Trump had kicked their ass in 2020. And what they learned was a lesson about inadequate energy supplies, and they will now unapologetically push relevant energy projects that have mature conditions and fit the nation's development needs. Period. In particular, the State Council meeting said that China would support coal as a main energy source by improving review and approval mechanisms on coal production and project construction, as well as releasing advanced capacity. Now that's from the Global Times. The State Council also decided China will forge ahead with the orderly development of nuclear power, approving 6 new nuclear power plants. I'm going to ask a question of the chat room. Just give me a range, maybe, a guess, plus or minus 5 years. When is the last nuclear power plant that we approved in the United States? Go ahead. Look it up. China just happens to have cornered the market on the crucial materials needed for non-nuclear green energy projects, like, for instance, molybdenum magnets and lithium and cobalt. China owns all of it. The only bone tossed to the climate change movement in the Global Times report was a Chinese academic suggesting China would transform its coal-fired power plants so they can start or stop operation more flexibly to adapt to the trend of applying wind power in large amounts. 1970 is the correct, actually 1980 is the correct number. 1980. What is that, 42 years? That's a long time. China underwent a serious energy crisis in the latter half of 2021, which was driven by President Donald Trump negotiating a trade deal with them and forcing them to stop charging a tariff on everything that they buy from us. Other factors include resurgent demand for Chinese goods in the wake of pandemic easing, conflicting CCP energy policies, and extreme market distortions, including power rationing and price controls. China was already digging, importing, and burning record amounts of coal last year, and its consumption will only increase for the foreseeable future. But it doesn't matter because the Paris Climate Accords don't apply to China. The vaunted Paris Climate Accords give China a great deal of latitude to increase its emissions throughout the coming decades. So this mountain of burning coal, and we're talking about an additional 300 million tons, that's one hell of a mountain. It does not violate China's agreement, leaving environmentalists to quietly grumble that Beijing is undermining the spirit of the accord without breaking it. Whatever. Gosh, sometimes the public is so dumb, they just frustrate the crap out of me. So in the meantime, what's happening with energy? I mean, we have some new energy technology out there, right? We know how to generate energy. We know how to store energy. We know how to put it in the back of a vehicle and drive a vehicle off that energy. So why can't we get it going? Why can't we get it going? I have about 1,000 kilos of batteries right now. They're aging. I bought them in 2014, I think. So they're 8 years old. I would like to replace them. So I contacted the nation's largest battery recycling company. Actually, they're battery recycling brokers. They don't actually recycle, but they will facilitate it. And I like the idea of recycling. I mean, I separate my stuff here at the house. We separate our plastic and our glass, and we have 2 cans and all the way. I'm not against recycling. So I got 1,000 kilos of batteries. That's more than you have laying around your house. And so I call these guys up and I say, look, I got 1,000 kilos of lithium batteries, and I know the lithium is valuable. I know I paid about $25,000 for this amount of lithium. So it should be worth something. And what he told me is, oh, we don't pay, we charge. But we'll recycle the batteries properly. We'll make sure they're disposed of properly. And I said, yeah, like hell you will. I know exactly what you're going to do. You're going to charge me, and you're going to pick up my palletized batteries, and you're going to take them and throw them right in the landfill, and you're going to put the money in your pocket. That's not recycling. That's not what I have in mind. And he said, well, we don't pay for lithium. And so that's your great recycling industry in the United States of America. They lied to you again. Again, they lied to you. There is no lithium recycling business in the United States. It does not exist. So a federal appeals court ruled Tuesday of this week that local governments in California can now sue oil companies in state courts for allegedly causing climate change and hiding it from the public. Have you ever heard anything so ridiculous in your whole life? Do you know that with this piece of legislation, every slip and fall attorney in the state of California is going to sue the oil companies? They are the fatted calf, and they're not made of oil, they're made of blood, and they're going to bleed them to death. This lawsuit, by the way, goes all the way back to the year 2017. It is seeking damages for more than 30 companies, which the anti-oil San Francisco Chronicle said fossil fuels producers profit from products contributing to rises in temperature and sea levels. First of all of that is fake. There is no rise in temperature. There is no rise in sea levels. And even if there were, they wouldn't be caused by fossil fuels. This is completely insane. I cannot believe California would, the federal appeals court in California would do this. The plaintiffs in the case are San Mateo, Marin, and Santa Cruz counties, and the cities of Richmond, Santa Cruz, and Imperial Beach in San Diego County. Local governments sued in state court under California's law allowing damages for a public nuisance, private actions that harm the public health. The companies want the case to be heard in federal court, where judges can consider state laws, but are generally less receptive to those laws than state courts and are more likely to dismiss such suits. The district judge, whose name is Judge Vince Chahabria of San Francisco, and by the way, he's with the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. He ruled initially that the suits raised no issues of federal law and belonged in state court. The Supreme Court told the appeals court last year to reconsider its ruling after ordering another court to review possible federal issues in a similar suit by the city of Baltimore. On Tuesday, the Ninth Circuit panel said it had considered all applicable federal laws and reached the same conclusion. The suits contend, and this is going to blow your mind, they contend that the oil companies' wrongful conduct in producing, selling, marketing fossil fuels contributes to global warming and sea level rise, which led to property damage and other injuries to cities and counties. Yep. And by the way, Judge Sandra Ikuda said this in a 3-0 ruling. That's how crazy this is getting. While the companies produce some of the oil as federal government contractors or on federal land, Ikuda said they did not carry out governmental orders or policies, and none of their actions implicated federal laws. It's time to go to trial to hold these defendants accountable for deceiving consumers about the damages associated with the use of their products, and to protect our taxpayers from having to bear the enormous costs resulting from that deception. It's possible. Steely Dan says California will split into 2 separate states. It could happen. It would be devastating if they do, because now you're talking about 2 administrations with governors and houses and senates and all that stuff. It just bloats everything out of proportion. What would be a smarter idea, Steely Dan? And you might pick up the phone and call somebody about this. I think the state of California needs an electoral college. I think the state of California needs their own electoral college. That way, Los Angeles and San Francisco are not California. People that live in Sacramento and Redding and San Diego, they would all have a voice then. Every single county in the state would have an equal number of representation in a republic of California. Yes, I think that's what the Founding Fathers had in mind. Because when we first started this country, there were 13 colonies, but each one of those colonies were considered by the founders as sovereign countries. They were sovereign countries with their own governor and their own constitution. And what the federal government, what the role the federal government played was a mediator, a central welfare, a central defense organization that would allow the 13 sovereign nations to work as one, with one currency, one highway system, one railway system of one national defense, one army, one navy, etc. That's what it was originally designed to be. And by the time we got to the Civil War with 20 states and then 22 and then 26, the same kind of concept applied. Somewhere after the Civil War, the country went bankrupt. And when it did, it incorporated. And when it incorporated, the whole concept, the whole working concept of states being sovereign countries sort of became impractical. And it became a central government with a supremacy clause ruling over the state governments. And that's kind of where we are today, only on a much bigger scale. I think we need to go back and think like the Founding Fathers thought. Of course, they didn't perceive a state like California with 55 million people. They didn't perceive a Florida or a Illinois or even a Texas. They did not perceive a population like that and a highway system and the commerce and all of the diverse different industries that we have. They didn't perceive that. But they gave us the pattern. So if California would convert itself to a republic and install a electoral college in that state, then you wouldn't have this push for basically what we're talking about here is secession, right? I mean, yes, you're talking about, another state, Steely Dan, but the mindset, and I've been there, I've talked to those people, the mindset is secession. We're out of here. We want to be independent. Well, the problem with that is that they don't have their own army. They don't have a way of defending themselves. They will have to lean on the federal government to defend them. And having 51 states is a bigger burden than having 50. And it also changes the dynamic by adding 2 more senators and a number of representatives. Not so much adding more representatives because the population doesn't change, but adding 2 more senators to the mix takes us from 100 senators to 102 senators, and it's going to change the balance of power, because logic tells me that those 2 senators are going to be radical lefties. And by the way, if I want to talk a little bit about that, and then I want to talk a little bit more about the flight delays as a result of this. Hang on a second here. Wow, we have so much to go over yet. No, that's not either. Here it is. A phenomenon which we call left-to-Gs. Left-to-Gs. And I like to talk about this in terms of what I call the syndicate wasteland. The syndicate wasteland. We were talking about dystopian movies last night on Mike Barra's program. And I brought up, the Book of Eli and, movies like this that depict a post-apocalyptic Earth. And, we're not far from that. I mean, yes, it's easy to ride my motorcycle around, look at the green trees and the commerce and the nice clean farms and the houses and neighborhoods and stuff. But we're getting here. A couple of weeks ago, this person had an interesting experience in Idaho, and I want to share it with you. This person said, "We received a visit from a woman who lives about a mile away from us. She stopped to invite us to a community potluck and gathering being held in town. There were so many newcomers to this remote corner of North Idaho that she was hoping to foster an opportunity for people to meet, exchange contact information, and get to know each other. And everyone was invited, both old-timers and newcomers. And our community is small," she says, "with people scattered in outlying rural areas. The invitations extended to a radius of 8 or 9 miles and to 3 tiny towns, since the area is so thinly populated. We promised to be there and told several of our immediate neighbors about it as well. Well, my goodness," she says, "we had a good time. There were far more people than we anticipated, perhaps 120 or more, ranging from babies to elderly. We sat with some casual acquaintances and had a chance to greet neighbors we'd only seen a couple of times, and we met some new people who had just moved in. During dinner, the organizers passed around a microphone and asked all the family heads to stand and introduce themselves along with their spouse and children. Along with names, people were encouraged to say how long they'd lived there, where they came from, and any other pertinent information. Of the 50 or so family heads who stood to introduce themselves, a startling number were from blue areas, primarily California, Oregon, Western Washington, Colorado. Each and every person expressed profound gratitude, sometimes to the point of tears, about how happy they were to be amidst like-minded people. They expressed how welcomed they felt, how kind and friendly and helpful everyone had been, and how overwhelmingly pleased they were to have left behind their former homes. A word we heard again and again is how they felt called to leave their previous location and move somewhere less hostile. After introductions, the tables were cleared, chairs reassembled, some homespun entertainments were offered, comic skits, a barbershop quartet, some sing-alongs. I don't know how long the gathering lasted, she said, since we left after 2.5 hours, but we enjoyed every minute of it. Apparently, these gatherings are planned once a month. We plan to attend all of them. This, Earth Explorers, is just one snapshot of life in the midst of the nationwide exodus of people who are relocating. These newcomers in our area aren't unique. Similar scenarios are unfolding in conservative areas all across the country. For the last couple of years, Americans have been on the move. The COVID lockdowns prompted millions of people to leave the cities and take up residence in suburban or rural areas in a movement called the Great Relocation. Kind of went with the Great Resignation. This movement was compounded by how fast urban areas embraced woke policies that made them unlivable. As a result, red states were massively impacted, and not always in a positive way. Of great concern are the leftugees, defined as a Democrat, progressive, or socialist who is fleeing from the financial and big government hardships their blue state politicos created in the first place. While they are moving in pursuit of more affordable housing and higher quality of life, it does not mean they prefer a red policy model of low taxes and fewer services, which creates a dilemma for the red states on the receiving end of the current trend. The last 100 years have given ample proof that the further left a regime is, the more people want to leave it. Saskatchewan's socialism sent private businesses and people scurrying to Alberta. The Berlin Wall was erected to keep Eastern Europeans from fleeing communism. And these days, it is Americans leaving Democrat states for Republican ones. Leftugees are famous for turning red states blue, and then wondering why their progressive voting patterns create the same shitholes from which they escaped. I live in Spokane, and we've had a lot of people move here from Seattle, Portland, and LA over the last 2 years. They talk a good game about why they're leaving, but they don't realize they are the reason these cities have gotten as bad as they are. They voted for leadership and were more concerned that their leaders know which pronouns to use than if those leaders will keep them safe. Another added, kind of like locusts. Destroy an area, then move on to the next. No remorse. No comprehension of why it was destroyed in the first place. But the people we met at this get-together are not leftugees. They are America's political refugees. The pressure on conservative living in blue areas has gotten worse and worse. Schools are hostile to conservative values. Health care is hostile to conservative values. Libraries are hostile. Social media is hostile. Even some churches are hostile. In short, the climate for many has become untenable. Most are forced to live with their lips perpetually zipped. One false word, one incautious statement in the produce section, one non-woke observation, and they could honestly be in fear for their lives. No wonder these people flee and end up as our new neighbors, grateful beyond words to be living in a place where they're not spat upon, where they're not cussed out in public, or have their tires slashed, or their pets murdered, or beaten, or robbed, and hated. The reality is that conservative states are becoming more conservative, and they are gaining political clout at the same time. The people moving about the country aren't missionaries going forth to spread socialism. They're escaping the blue states in search of the America of their youth. They are political refugees. And the political refugees we met at this gathering are going to be wonderful additions to our community. They won't be bringing blue policies with them. In fact, they're far more likely to fight to uphold the values that attracted them here to begin with. They may be refugees, but in some ways, they're more than that. They are the best of what was left in the increasingly dysfunctional blue states. With their departure, the now certain failure of those states is all the more ensured. And I will add to that, this is extremely dangerous, because when the prey leave, which are these political refugees, they're you, they're me. When the prey leaves, they will begin feeding on each other. And when you see a city of 10 million, 20 million, 25 million people feeding on one another, everybody suffers. Look what's happening in Shanghai right now. Now, in Shanghai, this is more or less imposed by the government. More or less imposed by the government. That's what we perceive is happening over there. I don't know for sure. I haven't been to Shanghai in many, many years, and it's hard to report on it. But Thursday of this last week, they began installing electronic door alarms on some of those huge condos that you see to prevent people from leaving their homes while the city's entire populace remains under state-mandated Chinese coronavirus lockdown. We don't have anything like that in this country, but it's kind of a type and a shadow. Those who are required to quarantine at home will have sensors placed on their doors. Let's see. The door alarms are part of the Shanghai's government newly tightened rules for the urban center's ongoing lockdown. The issue is a lot of these people, A, are not sick, and B, they don't have a way to eat. Yeah, that's a good observation, Ron. Ron Lepper is in the chat room, and he says L.A. is eating itself. San Francisco done ate itself. I have friends who live in Northern California and people that live in the Los Angeles area, my old stomping grounds when I was a kid. And it's true, there's still a lot of people wearing masks. There's still a lot of hatred at the Starbucks and at the Trader Joe's. They really are a nation divided among itself, and they're never going to thrive doing that. I get you, hair raiser. Constitutional carry is the way to go. Yes, for self-defense. For self-defense, I agree. You can probably keep yourself safe. But what do you do about the community? How do you get the community back on its feet? How do you get these people who think the world owes them a living to participate in the care and feeding of the community? That's the thing. I don't really know the answer to that question. What do? You can't burn the whole thing down and start over again. You have something good to start with. It's difficult to say. An old dog says, pure evil, and those that do biz with them need to check their souls. We're talking about the Chinese. I work right now for one of the Fortune 100. I have worked for various Fortune 100 companies as a consulting engineer for many, many years, over 25 years. And I have to tell you, almost to a company now, at the very highest levels, the policy is coming back. We're backing away from China. We're not going to get, and we're going to get as little as possible from China. That's easier said than done. Let me give you one example. Electric motors. I don't know if you know how electric motors are made, but the part that turns inside the motor is called the armature, or another term is a commutator, okay? So some of them have brushes like our motors that we utilize. Some are brushes, some are AC, some are DC, blah, blah, blah. But the point is that anything under about 5 horsepower, which is a pretty good size electric motor, is very common in industry to run things like pumps and fans and, various things like that. Anything under 5 horsepower is not being wound in this country, or even for that matter, rewound. It used to be in the old days when you burned up a 1 horsepower motor, you took it down to the motor shop, they stripped the wire out of it. They made sure the insulators were good. They cleaned up the brushes or the bars on and made sure the resistance was good. And they rewound the motor and rebuilt it. It cost a little bit of money, $200, $300, $400, $500, but it was cheaper than buying a new motor. Your old motor fit the application you took it from, and some of these are very old motors. It would be impossible to find a motor to fit that exact frame. You would have to change a lot more equipment to change that motor, so they rebuild the motor. The problem is none of that is done in this country anymore. All the equipment that makes commutators, especially small ones, It's not done in this country. They're all done in China. All that technology was exported during the Obama administration. It didn't come back. So, well, you think to yourself, gee, we'll just go to the internet and we'll go to Commutators R Us and we'll buy a commutator for our motor. Doesn't happen. It doesn't exist. Here we are, a country of 330 million people. You know how many electric motors there are in this country? I'll bet you there's more electric motors than there are people in this country. That's how many electric motors there are in this country. 0 of them can be repaired in this country. Nothing. Because the technology, the machines are not that complicated. So I thought to myself, wow, what a great business to go into. Why not just buy a few winding machines, rent a small, 20, 30,000 square foot shop and wind commutators on a production level for motor manufacturers? It's a great idea. No, it's not a great idea. It's a fabulous idea. Anybody that has the money wants to invest in American manufacturing, you call me. You call me because I have the business plans out. Believe me, I can create entire industries, not just businesses, industries, hiring thousands of employees. If you have the investment money, talk to me. This is national security we're talking about here. Speaking of national security, have you been delayed due to a flight cancellation lately? I know you have. I know people who've been writing in their Facebook just recently of that happening, like right down in Dallas. You ever wonder why JetBlue has 76% of its schedules affected by delays on clear weather days? You ever wonder that? I do. I wondered. I did a little bit of research, and I did a few interviews on my own. They claim they don't have the staff. And you know what? They're right. When I met with an American Airlines pilot for dinner to discuss the situation in the industry, he told me the pilots were being grounded during their flight physicals because their hearts were damaged from the jab. The pilots rebelled, and the company backed down, enforcing them to get jabbed. Now, a disaster was very narrowly avoided earlier this month when an American Airlines pilot, his heart stopped just minutes after landing a plane in an incident that has been described as severe post-vaccination cardiac arrest. This is a syndrome, a health issue that we have never had ever in this country before. This just happened since the creation and the forcing of this jab upon perfectly healthy people during a pandemic. The pilot, his name is Robert Snow. He had flown the Airbus 321 with 200 people on board from Denver to Dallas-Fort Worth. He experienced cardiac arrest while he was still in the flight deck, and a nurse who was on board the plane performed CPR. He had to be shocked 3 times to be resuscitated. The captain does not remember a thing from the time the plane pulled up to the gate through the next 24 hours. After regaining consciousness in the ICU, he eventually realized that doctors were not taking his concerns about the vaccine seriously, so he called the group U.S. Freedom Flyers for help. They helped provide him with medical care and legal assistance. In a video, Mr. Snow, Captain Snow, said that he was forced to get the vaccine in order to keep his job. The pilot had no underlying health conditions and had been very healthy until getting the Johnson & Johnson jab. U.S. Freedom Flyers Joshua Yoder, a commercial airline pilot, spoke of the Stu Peters show about the incident, pointing out that if it happened just a few minutes earlier, it could have ended very differently. Yoder said he has hundreds of emails from people working for American Airlines who have written to complain about their treatment and the side effects they have experienced from the forced jabs. He said there are hundreds of cases that he is personally aware of, but airlines and unions are covering it up. Many people are just starting to speak out about the threats, intimidation, and coercive tactics that the airlines used to get employees to comply with their vaccine mandates. He also said the pilots are losing flight medical clearances at an unprecedented rate, and this is exactly why they don't have the staff to fly those planes. He knows of pilots who are flying with chest pain, and they're scared to seek help because they could permanently lose their flight medicals. For pilots, having certain types of heart problems could end their career forever. Among the cases Yoder mentioned was a 25-year-old pilot who had been suffering chest pain problems since his second shot, and a flight attendant who recently suffered her fourth stroke after 2 jabs and said she doesn't think she'll live much longer. Concerns are growing about the safety of vaccinated pilots flying planes. Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long, a brigade surgeon for the U.S. Army's 1st Aviation Brigade at Fort Rucker, testified in November about what happened when she voiced concerns about 3 pilots who had to be grounded in the same morning because of injuries from the jab. She said, and I quote, "After I reported to my command my concerns that in one morning I had to ground 3 out of 3 pilots due to jab injuries. The next day, my patients were canceled, my charts were pulled for review, and I was told that I would not be seeing acute patients anymore, just healthy pilots there for their flight physical." Yoder said that U.S. Freedom Flyers are calling for the airlines to be held responsible for what is happening and immediately stop all mandates. He also said that jabbed pilots should undergo medical tests to ensure there are no heart or clotting dangers. The mainstream media, by the way, the fake stream news, has completely, totally ignored this story. I just shared it with you. And the same thing's happening virtually everywhere. During a panel discussion hosted by Senator Ron Johnson on the jab mandates and jab injuries, Army Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long, who is a brigade surgeon for the A1 Aviation Brigade in Fort Rucker, I already told you her story, but she says, with respect to aviation safety, risk communication is critical. She said, I saw 5 patients in clinic, 2 of which presented with chest pain days to weeks after the jab and were subsequently diagnosed with pericarditis and were worked up to rule out myocarditis. The third pilot, with respect to aviation safety, the third pilot had been jabbed and felt like he was drunk, chronically fatigued within 24 hours. After I reported to my command my concerns that in one morning she had to ground 3 pilots, she was taken out of commission, basically. Now, research shows that most individuals with myocarditis do not have any symptoms. Complications of myocarditis include dilated cardiomyopathy, arrhythmias, sudden cardiac arrest, and carries a mortality rate of 20% at 1 year and 50% at 5 years. Now, what really worries me, Earth Explorers, is the forced jab of 11-year-olds. If 50% of those 11-year-olds have heart attacks within 5 years, that means that none of them are going to reach the age of 40. My greatest fear is that this loss of life from the jab is not going to be associated with the jab. It is going to be associated to something else. He was overweight. He was out of shape. He had bad genetics, blah, blah, blah. But it's not going to go back 5 years to that jab. Shots carry mRNA that causes the recipient to create trillions of spike proteins. And this is a serious, serious problem for 5 reasons. First, It turns out that the spike proteins are not remaining in the shoulder where the jab happens. Okay, they're circulating in the blood and in virtually every single organ, including the testes and the ovaries. Second, the spike proteins themselves have been shown to be pathogenic, attaching to endothelial, which is the lining of your mouth and your esophagus and your gut, pulmonary, which is your lung area, and other cells, forming clots and attacking heart cells. Third, the spike proteins and their lipid nanoparticles cross the blood-brain barrier with unknown long-term effects on the brain and high concern for chronic neurodegenerative disorders. Fourth, these spike proteins interact with many signaling pathways, which may trigger tumor formation, cancer, and other serious diseases. And fifth, according to Pfizer's Japanese distribution of LNP accumulation, unexpected sequestering in reproductive organs and spleens, that's your testes, your ovaries, and the organ that stores and helps clean the blood, raise very serious long-term concerns. An air crew training program, that's ATP, 519, 1 to 8 states, we shall accept no unnecessary risk. An unnecessary risk is any risk that, if taken, will not contribute meaningfully to the mission accomplishment or will needlessly endanger lives or resources. Army leaders accept only a level of risk in which the potential benefit outweighs the potential loss. From a risk management assessment perspective, with no long-term safety data regarding these 5 issues, this is an unacceptable risk management risk. Okay, this is not something we should be doing. So when I think about, the CCP, or I even think about Russia, or I think about Iran, or I think about some of the other hostile players in the country, in the world, they cannot shoot down our F-22 Raptors. They cannot shoot down our F-35s. They're technologically superior, and they can't be touched. We would shoot down every SU or MiG that came up against us. So what the Global Syndicate has done is they have given a Virtual Joe and his gang of criminals a task, not to shoot down the planes, but to shoot down the pilots. And that's exactly what they did. That's exactly what they did. So the material safety data sheet that goes with the proteins that we're talking about for this primary ingredient, which is this ALC 0315, which is in the Pfizer shots. This is what the MSDS says. The MSDS is the material safety data sheet. Every single compound that is generated has an MSDS associated with it. Every single person that works around with or by this compound has the right to know. That's what it's called, the right to know. There's a yellow notebook that has that MSDS in it. And that MSDS says, under Category 2, under the OSHA HSC regulations, 21 CFR 1910, which covers a lot of stuff, but primarily this. It includes several concerning warnings, and this is a limited list. There's more, but I'm just going to read these 5. Seek medical attention if it comes into contact with your skin. If it is inhaled and if breathing is difficult, give cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Number 3, get out. Evacuate if there is an environmental spill. Number 4, the chemical, physical, and toxicological properties have not been completely investigated. Number 5, the product has not been fully validated for medical applications for research use only. Yeah, that's what we're talking about here. So ALC 0315 is a known toxin with little study. Specifically, it is still lacking toxicity, carcinogenic, and teratogenic studies, and is specifically restricted to research only. Let's see here. Secretary Austin has an order in relation to the jab mandates that came out this week, another round. In an information paper, it was stated that until personnel should use only as much force as necessary to assist medical personnel with immunizations. In other words, if you don't accept the jab, you're in the military, you don't accept the jab, you will be restrained and you will be jabbed. This woman says, I personally observed the most physically fit female soldier I have seen in over 20 years in the Army go from collegiate level athlete training for Ranger School to being physically debilitated with cardiac problems, newly diagnosed pituitary brain tumor, thyroid dysfunction within weeks of getting jabbed. Several military physicians have shared with this person their firsthand experience with a significant increase in the number of young soldiers with migraines, with menstrual irregularities, with cancer, with suspected myocarditis. They're reporting cardiac symptoms after the jab. Numerous soldiers and DoD civilians have reported how they were sick, they were bedridden, they were debilitated, and unable to work for days to weeks after getting jabbed. So I bring this to your attention because at my website, which is brooksagnew.blog, I'm going to go ahead and take you there right now because I haven't done this in a while with people. And I think it's important because you need to know how to get here, how to do this. So, hang on one second here. That didn't come up. There we go. I'll try that. One more time. There we go. Now we're there. Okay, so let me make this full screen. Let me go to my shared screen, and I am going to show this to you. So this is my website. You'll know it's my website because it says I'm Brooks Agnew. We're going to go right up to where it says a store. You see where it says store? I'm going to hover over that, and you'll see this menu pop up. So we're going to click on the store. And that is going to open up my normal bookstore. And you're going to see right here, it says Brooks Agnew's Bookstore. And of course, you can get mugs, you can get a t-shirt, you can get a team hat. But right here, it says click the button below to learn more about therapeutics. And you'll notice there's a button right here, it's live. So we're going to click on that button right there. And that is going to take us to a special page called Therapeutic Reports. Now, these reports are extensive, and they contain tons of good information for you. By the way, there are no Chinese products are utilized in this. And this information is about 2 medications that are very, very successful in treating COVID-19. One is called ivermectin, and the other is called hydroxychloroquine. You're totally familiar with these. We affectionately call these Ivan and Roxy. And it's so simple to buy this report. The ivermectin report is $75, and the hydroxychloroquine report is $86. All you have to do is click on the Buy Now button. It's very simple to do. And this page comes up. This is how you pay. And you'll notice right here, I'm going to highlight it for you. Right there is the link for the digital report. It's right here in the checkout page. So the report will instantly download for you while you're waiting for samples to arrive. Because what's going to happen when you click here and you make your payment is 100 tablets of ivermectin are going to be mailed to you right here. See where it says sample packets with 100 tablets are going to be shipped to you at no extra charge. So that's how it's going to happen. And the same thing with the hydroxychloroquine 100 tablets. You're going to know how to protect yourself. You need to have this stuff in your arsenal just in case. It is effective against all the variants, and it is enough to keep you out of the hospital. We have experience now treating more than 5,000 people, 5,000 people in numerous nations. 0 of them have gone to the hospital. None. And I know for a fact at least 4 of them have gotten out of the hospital using these therapeutics. So that's where it's at. I want you to have it, and I want you to take care of yourself. I will, let's see, I want to make sure that that link is posted so that you have it. Okay, I'll just do this. We'll click right there, and you can see it on the screen. There's the link. If you want to just type that into your phone, into your pad, into your PC, into your laptop, you can go straight there and you can buy it for yourself. Very simple to do. Or you can buy it for a friend. All right, let's talk a little bit about what's going on in Rhode Island. There's a bill been introduced in Rhode Island that would require every eligible person who resides, works, or pays taxes in the state to get jabbed. Anybody who refuses to get jabbed in Rhode Island is going to be fined $50 a month. And they're going to owe twice the amount of personal income taxes as would otherwise be assessed. The state will double your income taxes if you do not comply. This also applies to parents who refuse to jab their kids. Any medical exemption requires the signature of 3 different doctors, each notarized. But even medical exemptions can be thrown out if a government bureaucrat decides those doctors are wrong. So if you live in Rhode Island and you haven't been jabbed, get out. Get out. Leave the state. Do whatever you can, whatever it takes. Pack up and get you and your kids out of that state. I don't care. Leave your house behind. You could take your pets, but get the hell out of that state until this bill can be defeated. This election is coming up very soon. It's now almost May. When we get to Labor Day, I'm not talking Memorial Day, which is at the end of May, but I'm talking about Labor Day, which is at the end of August. When we get to Labor Day, the election is going to begin. That's when election season begins. All of the campaigns begin. All of the speeches begin. The call for money is going to go off the chain. It's going to be everywhere. When that date comes, we're going to have to make a decision about whether or not we're going to have an election. Now, think back a little bit. I'm not being outrageous here. During the 2016 election season, more than 100 candidates on the ballot in Mexico were assassinated before Election Day. They were murdered. In the U.S., we frown on such things. Now, Zelensky, he jailed his opponents. He shut down the press. And he has a military task force to hunt down independent journalists and arrest them. One of our sources, Gonzalo Lira, was captured and feared dead last week. But he showed up a couple of days ago. He has been arrested and informed us he was being investigated by the, quote, legitimate authority for his reporting. His phone was seized. His laptop was taken. He's still doing interviews, and he's still not going to stop, and he's not going to leave Ukraine. In the U.S., the global syndicate is still attacking candidates to get them off the ballot. As the country braces for these midterm elections, The syndicate seems to be rallying behind 3 Ds: democracy, disinformation, and disqualification. The latter effort just received a huge boost from a judge in Georgia who has announced a challenge to knock Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene off the ballot as an insurrectionist. Believe me, nothing says democracy like preventing others from voting. Just ask Abraham Lincoln or Volodymyr Zelensky. By the way, I was so impressed with the fine high-resolution picture that got out of Volodymyr Zelensky sitting at his desk looking at a computer screen which had information on it that was being broadcast out of Ukraine that was telling the truth. But that wasn't the most amazing thing. The most revealing thing was right there on the table, on the mahogany desk next to his left hand, was about a tablespoon of cocaine spread out on the table, just ready for the snorting. Now, obviously, this picture didn't show Zelensky snorting the coke, but the coke was about, I would say his hand was here, and the coke was like right here. That's how close it was. He had no problem seeing it, smelling it, desiring it. It was right there on his desk. So now we have photographic proof that Zelensky is a crackhead, a cokehead, and he is a cross-dressing actor who is being paid to lead Ukraine into a world war. Now, many people have criticized Marjorie Taylor Greene for her inflammatory rhetoric and her extreme views. No less dangerous, though, is the means being used to get her off the ballot. It's all part of a new movement to defend democracy by, of course, denying it. To paraphrase the Vietnam strategy, democracy can only be saved by destroying it through the denial of speech or the right to vote. So, it's interesting. Judge Amy Totenberg ruled that critics could potentially strip Greene from the ballot due to her public comments before and after the January 6th celebration in Washington, D.C., which me and 500,000 of my friends attended. This is the same clause cited by other liberal members of Congress and legal experts as a way to bar dozens of Republicans, including President Trump, from office for allegedly engaging in insurrection against the United States or giving aid and comfort to its enemies. Well, I hate to tell you this, Earth Explorers, but I am not an enemy of the United States of America. I am a friend, I'm a patriot, and I will defend it with everything that I have. The fact that we have political prisoners being held in a 19th century dungeon in Washington, D.C., without being charged with anything means something has to change. All of that is going to go away. Those prisoners will be released. They will be richly compensated, and the leaders of the revolution will come out of that forged rank of patriots. It's all going to happen in January of 2023, if they allow the election to occur. And I think this is a big if. It's a legitimate if. A legitimate if. Let's see here. I want to talk about food storage a little bit. The human race belongs on this planet. We have a symbiotic relationship with this earth. And there are several ways we can measure the progress of human civilization. Of course, you can measure by population growth or the rise and fall of empires or our technological ability to reach for the stars. All of those things are good measures of humanity. But there's one simple measure. It's used to calculate the amount of energy humans use at any given time. And that has changed over the millennia. As humans have spread and their ability to form communities, effective communities has spread and gone highly advanced, we can now move about the planet in amazing speed, very safely, and we can communicate instantaneously around the planet with very little effort at all. But our ability to harness energy is one of our most useful skills. If one assumes that civilizations on other planets might possess similar skills, the energy consumption of a species is a good rough measure of its technological prowess. Sort of like, when you make a wood fire, you let the wood burn, but you're not always by the fire, right? So that means that you've got this rapid oxidation going on, and you're letting fire go into the environment that is not being used by you. It isn't being used to cook. It's not being used to keep you warm. It's just burning. And so we've developed this thing, what's called the Kardashev scale. The Kardashev scale was created by Nikolai Kardashev, and he proposed this scale in 1964. Okay, we were thinking about going to the moon, and so he categorized civilizations into three types: planetary, and stellar, and galactic. Okay, this is a way to think of the progress of the human race as a species. So a type is able to harness energy on a scale equal to the amount of stellar energy that reaches its home planet, like solar energy that reaches the planet. We're not talking about converting solar energy into electricity only. We're also talking about the amount of energy that comes to the earth and helps plants grow and make food and also make fuel. Okay, all of that sun's energy is utilized in that way. So a type 2 species can harness energy on the scale of its home star. A type 3 can harness energy of its home galaxy. The idea was first popularized by Carl Sagan, who suggested a continuous scale of measurement rather than these simply three types. So we asked tonight this question: what type of civilization are we? And I think as a race, it doesn't look good. As communities, like let's say the U.S., certain areas of Europe, maybe Greece, maybe Norway, maybe Germany, certain areas of South America can be rated different than the rest of the world. Africa, Nigeria, Asia, most of China, it's a different scale than the rest of the world, and it's just that way, and there's really nothing anybody can do about it. But the question I ask is, what type of civilization are we? What about your community? What about where you live and what your state is doing? About 1,016 watts of solar energy reaches Earth on average, and every human and humanity currently uses about 1,013 watts. On Sagan's sliding scale, that puts us currently at about 0.73. And that's not bad for a bunch of evolved primates. But it raises an interesting question. Could we even reach type 1? Can we get the next 23% of type 1? We can't capture all the sunlight that reaches Earth and still have a habitable planet. It's got to be used for other things, which means we have to access the energy secondhand or in a second level. And we're doing that. We do that when we burn wood. We do that when we refine oil into gasoline and power our vehicles and our jets and our boats. All of that solar energy, and it's secondhand or third hand, and we're utilizing it. Okay, so that gets us to pretty close to being a type 1. The question in a paper which was recently posted to Air Shiv, the paper looks like three primary sources of energy: fossil fuels, nuclear, and renewable, and calculates their potential growth over time. On the one hand, reaching type 1 seems pretty easy. Make the production of energy your top priority, and you're going to get there in the end. But each type of energy source has its limitations. In an extreme case, such as burning every ounce of fossil fuel we can, it would lead to a level of climate change that could end us all in the so-called Great Filter. You can't become a Type 1 civilization if you're extinct. So, the team takes a more nuanced approach, analyzing the physical limitations of each type of energy source and balancing them against the need to limit climate change and pollution levels, blah, blah, blah. They found that even with realistic limitations, it is possible for humanity to reach a Type 1 level. The downside is we won't reach that level until at least the year 2371. And I think that may be the case if you look at the entire human race. But you have to understand, we have primitive areas of our planet. And by primitive, I mean they don't even have a clean glass of water. They don't have a sewage system. They don't have water treatment plants. They don't have paved roads. They walk barefooted in the mud. These are not developed countries. We have second world countries that have cities, but the buildings are old and they're dilapidated and they're not well maintained and they're very inefficient. They don't stay cool in the summer. They don't stay warm in the winter. People wear sweaters in the winter and they wear tank tops in the summertime. And they don't know how to utilize energy. They're more concerned with getting 2 or maybe, if they're lucky, 3 meals in a day. That's what they're more concerned with. That type of civilization that depends so much upon second and third hand sources of energy, they will never reach a Type 1. It doesn't matter what you do for them. Even if you provide them free electricity, a free place to live, and free 3 meals a day, they're never going to reach that Type 1. It's just not going to happen. There are areas of our planet that are highly advanced. I think California is a very green, environmentally conscious place. In some respects, it is very, very efficient. Is it Type 1 yet? No, because they don't know how. They've gotten so woke that they've reverted back to medieval ways of generating energy. They're back to using windmills. They're back to using wave power. They don't have enough energy to take care of 55 million people. So that's why people are leaving the state. They're going places where there is enough energy to sustain life. That doesn't exist in California, not unless you can afford a premium price, and most people cannot. So other areas, I think even smaller towns are getting to a point, especially if they're close to a nuclear power plant, they're getting very close to Type 1, maybe 0.9, 0.95. Their cars are very efficient. They don't use cars very much. They live close to work. They live close to where they shop. They walk more places, or they ride a bike, or they take public transit. They've reduced their energy usage footprint. We call it a carbon footprint, but that's bullshit. We're just talking about energy usage. What we need to do is get people to a point where they're producing more than they use. If you start a business and you hire people, but it costs you more in wages than what they can put on the loading dock for you to sell, you're going to go out of business. The same thing happens with energy. People have to produce more energy than they consume. And we can do that because we can turn peanut butter into eye tissue. Through technology, we can get to the point where we can stop shoveling our planet into our gas tanks and burning it. And we can do better. It won't take that burning that fire all day long and letting the rest of the heat go into the environment. All right, we are about 1 minute away. And I just wanted to remind you of what we started talking about tonight, about the park bench and about looking for the good in yourself and realizing that when you feel you're falling short, there is someone out there holding you and telling you you belong. All right? Go out and look for the good in others and help it to grow a little bit every day. And before long, you will have saved the planet. My name is Brooks Agnew. This has been America Free Radio. You've been my guest for the last 3 hours, or I've been your guest for the last 3 hours. Please tell a friend about us. That's the only way we grow. There's no other way for a podcast to grow except by the people who listen to it. Tell your friends, and that's how we grow. Wednesday night, I'm going to have a substitute. I'm going to be at a concert in Raleigh, and so I will have a substitute run my Revolution Radio program, okay? So be good to one another, and we will see you on next Sunday night at 8 o'clock. And thank you so much. Bless every one of you.